Between two dumbbells is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered medical, fitness, or nutritional advice.
Welcome to Between Two Dumbbells. I'm your host, Skip Hill. I bring 40 years of training experience to the table. Here today with Dr. Marv, the educated meathead, if you will, who's bringing the brains to the operation or to the project. We are going to posit a thought today about a specific exercise, or a couple of exercises actually. I'm going to go against the grain. I'm not only probably going to go against you, Dr. Marv, but I'm also going to go against basically the majority of the industry right now, and they're all going to be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Plus, I do have a lot of energy. I did drink a Monster Zero right before we started, so get ready, because I'm a little... I posit that the RDLs they don't suck, but I think they're highly overrated. How's that for a paraphrase? Okay. I'm also going to go one step further. I'm going to dive into the deep end, Dr. Mark, and I'm going to say that the seated leg curl, in my opinion, is overrated compared to the lying leg curl. So I have a feeling, we haven't talked about this in depth for reasons that we always have a better discussion sometimes prior, and then we waste all the good stuff before we press the button. So I don't think we're going to agree on much. This might actually be this going to be fun. Let's kind of go at it a little bit. Hopefully that we have some, not only a disagreement, but that maybe you make some points that I go, okay, I have to concede that. Maybe I get lucky and I make a point or two and you go, okay, I can concede that too. Yep. What are your thoughts?
So there's so much to do. So I disagree. I love RDLs. I think they're an amazing movement for hamstrings in your entire posterior chain. Big believer in those. And I do agree people will overstate the research on seated leg curls being superior to prone. If you actually have read the research, it's not that big of a difference. It's 5% difference in hypertrophy between a seated and a prone. However, I still think that seated leg curls are vastly superior to prone leg curls because most people aren't doing them correctly. And then we could also quickly touch on how the standing leg curl is complete crap. Stay away from it.
That I can agree with.
Yep. And I think lying dumbbell leg curls are vastly underutilized and possibly even better than a prone leg curl machine.
Interesting. Okay.
So there's a lot to unpack. So I want to hear your arguments first of why do you think a hinge RDL is overrated before I do my spiel.
Number one, the range of motion is so limited.
Okay.
Now, it is going to be important. I do have to say this. It is going to be important that we, or you more specifically, break down the mechanics of what is happening within the hamstrings as far as what's working, what's not working as much when you're doing an RDL, a seated leg curl, a lying leg curl, that sort of thing. Because obviously that stimulus is going to change.
Yes.
I don't benefit personally. I've been doing this for a long time. Doesn't mean that because it doesn't work well for me that, well, we need to wipe that, take that off the table and just wipe it out and that's no good. I don't find the hinging movements very effective from a developmental standpoint. I could see where it could play a big part in powerlifting and strength and no question. But because I'm just a hypertrophy guy, I'm a bodybuilding guy, I want just hugeness. And I have never seen that with the RDL. I will say this. I used to do a lot of stiff leg deadlifts and I say, stiff leg deadlifts, SLDL. I prefer the ASLDL acronym instead, and the A meaning almost stiff leg. Because I think even before it was spoken or discussed or talked about years ago, I wasn't doing them stiff leg because I just didn't feel that mechanically that was right. It's a slight bend at the knee. And I thought that those were pretty good, arguably a lot better than the RDL. I'm trying to figure out where the RDL all of a sudden popped up and went, I'd say people got together in a group in the industry and they're like, okay, we need to mix things up a little. We need to get a little crazy. Let's get rid of this stiff-legged deadlift that has been pretty effective. And we're just going to throw in RDLs, and we'll get everybody talking about RDLs, and nobody will do stiff-leg deadlift anymore. So I'm kind of looking at that first, and I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, and your thoughts on it. Basically, shoot me down. Let's argue. Let's debate. Let's punch each other in the mouth.
Cool. So, gloves off. Stiff-legged deadlifts, they absolutely on paper are vastly superior to an RDL for pure hamstring because you're getting a full stretch. I just don't like them from a risk standpoint, given what I do is most people do not have the mobility requirements to do almost stiff-legged deadlift. I do think the slight knee bend that slightly increases, maybe 5 to 10 degrees, puts you in a much safer position. So if you could simplify things, which I think is helpful, essentially what I think of is a hip hinge deadlift, so an RDL or an almost straight leg deadlift is simplifying, but going to hit more of the upper hamstring, right? In particular, the muscles that cross the hip joint. So the long head of your bicep femoris, both the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus, which are your inner hamstrings, right? The short head of the biceps femoris is kind of hard to really hit a lot. It does seem like the Nordic hamstring curls will hit the short head of the biceps femoris, as will a flywheel curl, which is that cool machine that adds a lot of loading on the eccentric. But no, for the most part, you're typically hitting, the long head of the bicep femoris, the semitendinosus and the semimembranosus. The RDL will get a lot of semitendinosus, right? More than the biceps femoris. So that's nice. While other versions will kind of change the order of that. So hip hinging, I just love it for getting a massive loaded stretch. I do think most people go way too deep. So once your hips quit moving back, the range of motion's done. This whole deficit, crazy range of motion, I don't like, because once your hips quit moving back, you fully lengthen your glutes and hamstrings, all other motions coming from the low back. Here's what people don't realize because they don't do what I do for a living. The small, paper-thin, tiny stabilizing muscles that go between your spine that, guess what, we cannot consciously control, are actually starting to relax to allow your spine to continue to flex. So your intrinsic stabilizers are turning off. Like, that's why I don't like it. I think the risk to reward is shit, right? Obviously, your erectors are going to be hit. So I think RDLs are superior to deadlifts for hypertrophy. Which I know is a crazy statement to make, but you're taking some of the quads out. So you're taking more stress on the posterior chain. Sure. And I just get better results if I could have somebody hip hinge and leg curl. You're not only going to do one. And that's why I just think RDLs are amazing. I get destroyed when I do RDLs and my hamstrings. There's a million variations, right? So you could do dumbbell, you could do landmine. I think underrated is a trap bar or a belt squat. If you have a lot of low back issues with RDLs, doing that on a belt squat machine could be incredibly helpful because it takes some of the shearing force away, because now the angle of pull is slightly in front of you versus straight down. So that's a hack that I don't think a lot of people realize. You'll probably feel it more in your hamstrings as well because it does slightly change the mechanics. Now, is your glute getting a slightly more stimulus than the hamstring? Probably, but it's not. It's to be debated. Some people like to do clickbait titles and say RDLs are not a hamstring exercise at all. I'm like, nobody will ever say they did a heavy RDL and they didn't wake up with sore hamstrings, right? Soreness is not the end all be all. I'm still a meathead and I still like that, right? A lot. But I think RDLs, I think people are leaving some gains on the table. It's also other benefits. And I know you said pure hypertrophy, which I'm respecting that. But why I also want to say, I think you should consider it is low back strength, core strength, the ability to learn how to brace, move maximum loading. I think it would be a mistake to not do them at all. You could also do B stance RDLs, which is like a 1.25 leg RDL. You could do single leg. What's interesting is a single leg RDL has never been compared strictly to a two-legged RDL, which you would think people would do because people like these comparison studies, but it's never been done. Obviously, you can't load it as much, but when I was religiously, I even did stiff-legged deadlifts as part of my DC training, which probably not ideal, but I wanted to do something brutal. And when I got up to 225 on a bar for straight leg deadlifts weighing 175 pounds, my hamstrings grew, as did my adductors. And again, I just think you're missing some of the upper hamstring development because a seated leg curl is not really going to get the long head of the biceps femoris or getting that upper portion of the inner hamstrings.
Okay. And I like where we're going with this. I kind of want to sit on this RDL discussion for a minute, not necessarily exhaust it, but get into that before we go to the leg curls, because I've got a lot in my brain here. First, I want to be completely honest and say I still do them. It's not that I think they suck. I guess what I'm saying is, my point is this: if I have to choose between a leg curl and an RDL, I'm going with the leg curl. And I typically start my hamstring workout with the leg curl version and then finish with the RDL. A couple reasons that I still do believe that RDLs are a good movement. I just don't like that it's such a complex, complicated, compound exercise that it kind of ranks up there in my brain with deads. It's like, okay, how do you really decide where is the main focus here? Yes, I can see it on the hamstring, but I'm getting a lot out of glute. And as you said, it comes down sometimes to how you're performing the exercise too. I have a history of chronic lower back issues. I have not had an injury in 9 years, but it's still in the back of my brain. So I do try to be careful. I know they're beneficial for my low back. I know that they are. I know they're beneficial for my glute development. They help a little bit with hamstrings. That's how it registers in my brain anyway. So I like them as a finisher. I still have them in there.
Okay.
If I had to pick, though, one hamstring exercise to do for the rest of my life, for me, it would not be the RDL. It would be the leg curl. So let me ask you this. Where are you with the mechanics as far as how deep are we going? What is optimal for depth? And not only depth, but coming up at the top. I tend to I'm not going to lock out typically unless I need a couple breaths to finish a couple extra reps. The other thing is I'm not going very heavy. I think that 95% of people who do them are going way too heavy. And I think that once you exceed a certain point, you can move the weight and mechanically, it'll look correct mechanically from a visual standpoint. Like I have critiqued clients and went, I can't say that there's anything wrong with your mechanics. But I think you lose the feel and the focus on the hamstring once it goes over every person's specific point of strength. Like they have a point where it just becomes too heavy, and then it shifts even less or more away from the hamstring into the glute and the lower back. I rarely go over, say, 90-pound dumbbells. And I always do them with dumbbells. For some reason, I don't like the barbell. I don't know why, but I do them with dumbbells. Maybe it's because I can keep them closer to my legs and kind of drag them versus a barbell. And the dumbbell rack is right there. It's just very practical, I guess. So let me know your thoughts on that. Depth, the strength. Am I completely off on this, or do I have some solid points in there?
Yeah. So I typically start people with dumbbells because you can kind of hold them at an angle, taking shearing force off the low back. The problem is as you get super strong, right? Like I'm not trying to flex because I'm not, guess what, everybody, by the way, all the comments saying I'm not a big open pro bodybuilder. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I know that. But
there's always going to be those people who want to point that out.
Good God, when did I ever say? So anyways.
They don't have a profile picture, mind you.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Yeah. So
correct.
That's the way
it's funny
goes.
how that works.
Yeah.
But like I use the ones and they are a pain in the ass to get going. But I think I'll pull up an old video real quickly and I'll kind of talk about that. But there's something with the feet that nobody talks about that would make a massive difference. But I think the easiest way, and we could put in the other, tutorials in post, but if I pull up.
Who's that sexy guy in the red hat?
I know, right?
Oh, that's not bad.
So this is lockdown footage, right? So years ago. Okay. As soon as my hips quit moving back, I'm done, right? So if you go any lower, like I talked about, your spinal stabilizers are done. All you're doing is putting your back in a vulnerable position. Yes, will you get a little bit more erector activation? Absolutely. I don't think the risk to reward is there. Okay. Now there's a couple things that are really important to point out. First, my chin is neutral, so my vision is a pendulum. Okay. So if you look up and extend your neck, you extend your low back. So see how that last rep was a little uneven. And then I now do not take any pauses at the top. I do continuous reps only, which is a hard skill to develop. because I think it's significantly better, because you're not putting those inroads in your nervous system doing, a million mini widowmakers in a given set, right? Because you can get more. And I think that's what really beats people up neurologically. But what I was talking about is keep your neck neutral. And everybody could do this at home. So we're going to do an experiment. So you're going to keep your neck neutral. You're going to put your one arm straight out, and then you're going to press down on that and you're going to resist it. And then all you're going to do is you're going to look all the way up, do it again, and you will feel the strength different. The same thing happens specifically in your hamstrings. When I extend my neck, I extend my low back, and it shuts down force output. Now, this is my opinion. This is not because I'm a big dynamic neuromuscular stabilization guy, aka DNS for bracing. It is the cheat code that I teach people in office. But my thought is, what do we do when we get startled? We know for a fact we jump down to protect our organs as ancestral defense mechanism. So I think it's an old defense mechanism of, if you're fighting something in this extended position, quit fighting it and cover up to protect your organs. So chin is neutral is big. The second thing is you've got to keep your foot flat on the ground, right? So a lot of people will rock into their heels and their toes actually come up. The big toe is a trigger for your glute. So if you want to be able to really push through that big toe knuckle to keep your glute engaged, that's massively important. Sometimes I'll even put little foot wedges that almost look like door jammers. When we do our gym bag stuff, I'll show what they look like on screen. And then another thing though is at the bottom, as soon as your hips quit moving back, you're done. But you have to keep your foot flat, but you're actually going to push down on your heel to engage, to initiate the movement up. You will feel your hamstrings fire by doing that. So that's a way to get a little bit extra hamstring activation. I completely agree. When you go super heavy, you probably won't, you'll take away a little bit of like that mind to muscle connection. It's never going to be the same as the leg curl, but keeping your foot flat, keeping your chin neutral, as soon as your hips quit moving back, push down on the heel. And everybody can do that the very next, you could even, the listeners can even do it just standing. Do a body weight RDL, and then do it again where you push off. You literally push down on your heel to come out of the hole. You'll feel your hamstrings light up.
Okay, let me ask you this about the neutral position of you're saying chin, neck, chin. Okay. Yep. So just so I have a visual or I have a cue, I should not be looking in the mirror.
No.
Then. Okay. You have to understand something, and I'm sure that you do. The listeners, I guess, need to understand something. Because I've trained for 41 years and I know a lot of shit, but when I hear something like this and I go, ooh, I need to try that. I might have to change that. That is very difficult to rewire and reprogram something that I have done for a very long time. Now, oddly enough, my DPT, who does my dry needling and my cupping with motion, cupping with movement, which absolutely sucks, but is incredibly effective every Tuesday. Yep. Dr. Petros, friend of mine, he told me that I have this forward lurch with my head, and that I literally look like that thing from The Abyss.
Yeah.
And you have to be, I dated myself probably with that reference, but you know what I'm talking about? And I wonder if things like that might play into that. I don't want to go down this hole if I'm taking this off on a tangent. The point being, I have always done that. There's another thing. Reprogramming my brain to go through my toe. I did this the other day after I heard you say this about this cue, and I thought, I have been coming through my heel for I don't know how long. It was driven into us as far as driving from the heel for all quad movements. So I probably just took that into hamstring as well. So I tried to drive with put more focus on the big toe because you said it would activate the glute more. That's going to take me a minute to get used to that as well. That's an odd one for me. Maybe even more. I'm sure I can look down. I don't need to look in the mirror when I'm doing RDLs because I've got the balance. It's not like I'm trying to balance out dumbbells doing an overhead press or something like that. That's not going to be as difficult. I think I'm probably going to just instinctively from habit look up and go, oh, quit looking up, just look down. But the heel to toe thing is going to be difficult.
Yeah. So, and here, let me just preemptively dispel the hateful comments, but please still comment your hate because it helps us. People go, well, what does Southside elite, West Side talk about looking up in a squat? Okay, well, first and foremost, those guys have erectors the size of my freaking 64-ounce water jug.
Right.
So them looking up might get them to neutral, right? It's not going to dump their low back into crazy extension. I wish I had my spine model and my foot model. I'll make sure I have those next time. And also, your hamstrings are not a primary mover on a squat. Sorry, they are a stabilizer, so it's not the end of the world if some of their force output goes down. But again, you could literally lie on the ground, keep your chin neutral, have somebody pull on your leg, resist it, look up on the ground, have them pull on your leg, resist it, and you will be weaker. Now, you're still going to be driving off your heel, right, to engage the hamstrings, but why that big toe knuckle matters, not the tip of it, but that big knuckle, right, at the end of your foot, is you want to get to fully lengthen the glute and to properly squat and deadlift. You need your foot arch to drop down, which is called a pronated position. I use the term unlocked. What that does is that allows your entire lower leg to fully internally rotate, which will increase the length of your glutes in particular, right? And so that's why that's massively important. And then obviously like a hip thrust, that's going to be more important than say a squat, but I still like that. Or lunges, especially my female physique competitors, like will put wedges under their feet, hook their glute up to the newbie. They'll do my favorite foam roller RDL in a lunge with the wedges under their foot. And they're like, my glute is cramping and it's awesome, right? So keeping that down, you don't want your toes to come all the way up because you've lost that ability to fully pronate the foot, which is going to change some of the rotation up the chain. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I'll tell you what else makes sense. You clarified by saying, and I think this is important for the listeners, just in case they missed it. Maybe they didn't, but if they did, you're not necessarily saying drive the big toe into the floor, but the ball of the foot at the base of the big toe.
Yep.
That's a big, big difference. So
correct.
Where until you explain that, like a week ago when I was playing around with it, I was thinking big toe. But I can see, and this makes more sense, the ball of the foot right below the big toe, because that's where you're driving from anyway. The ball of your feet, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that I understand it, have always understood it is, even though we started out years ago with the idea of drive from the heel, put your heels through the floor, I think that was more of a powerlifting cue than it was necessarily bodybuilding, because when we're doing squats as a bodybuilder, we really do want it to be quad dominant. So I shifted from the mentality or the idea of driving the heels to balancing that load equally from the ball of the foot to the heel, pretty much like a 50-50. You can arguably drive a little bit more on the ball of the foot to get a little bit more quad development with allowing the knee to come over the foot just a little bit more. But I think at the same time that you do that, that also can create more stress then on the knee too. So where are you with, and I don't want to change to the quad part, but I just want to touch on this real quick. Are you in the balance camp? Are you?
Yeah, because essentially you have something called a foot tripod. So pretend this is my foot. You want to have equal pressure on your heel, pretend this is my big toe knuckle, right? The ball of my foot, and on the fifth, right? Okay. You want that points of contact. For quads, you do want to be driving through the heel because that allows your shin to rotate. So believe it or not, your knee must rotate when we're bending and extending it. When you bend your knee, my shin bone, aka my tibia, must internally rotate in relation to my thigh bone, aka my femur. When I extend, it's the opposite. So the super low foot heel off a leg press, yes, you could get a bigger stretch on the quad, but I do think it takes away some of your body's natural ability to rotate the knee, because that's, that heel bone's connected to a bone called your talus, which is what the tibia rests on. Well, if I lose that pressure, I'm going to lose a little bit of that natural rotation. So I like the balance camp. And I still think you just don't want people will lean so far back, all 5 toes are off the ground. I don't want that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's that balancing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And we will leave, obviously, quad movements, for another show.
Correct.
The reason I brought it up was to basically get from you whether there is a different cue for driving, as far as, you're talking about the hamstring, driving primarily focus on driving that knuckle at the ball of the foot below the big toe. And I didn't know if there was the same cue, if you felt there was a similar cue for quads too. But again, like I said, we can focus on that.
But having that foot tripod is big. It all starts with your feet. Powerlifters have it right. They talk about the foot way more than bodybuilders.
Sure.
do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And guess what? Your foot can make a massive difference with posing as well. Like
Absolutely.
Putting pressure one direction versus another changes it. If I put pressure on the ball of my pinky, that will lightly externally rotate my thigh, which will allow my glute to pop without having to crazy flex it, right? Like foot pressure is massive. He doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I will give him a shout out because I like what he's doing. And he actually came out with a mat for posing. Daniel Coffin, I don't know how to say his name. He's like really diving into foot pressure for posing. And I think it's great because it starts with your feet, both in the gym and everything with lower body and posing. What happens at the foot directly impacts the hip. Now we're going a little bit clinical, but real quickly, if somebody had a rolled ankle 20 years ago and it wasn't rehabbed right, it will change the biomechanics at the foot. So I'll be able to spot it when I'm watching somebody walk. Hey, you injured that ankle. That was 20 years ago. It changes biomechanics. And if my foot's not able to go with a high arch, aka locked position or supinated position to that unlocked, right, that I just talked about with lifting, that changes hip mobility. Because when the foot locks, the whole leg rotates externally. When the foot unlocks, the whole leg rotates internally. Well, that old ankle sprain will change your gait pattern, which will change mobility in your hips, which that impacts you in the gym and in posing. So the foot's the driver of the lower body that nobody talks about, right?
Okay.
That it begins and ends with the foot when it's lower body.
Okay. Now, do we want to kind of segue into the leg curl movements, or do we want to?
Yep.
Okay. And the reason, before I do that, I want to ask you this: do you have a preference from a hamstring standpoint as far as whether the almost stiff leg deadlift is more effective for the hamstring than an RDL?
On paper in a vacuum, absolutely. I just think most people don't have the mobility to do an actual stiff-legged, because we pretty much use them in, like they're swapped in and out online all the time. They're technically different movements.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. But I've never programmed a knees locked out. And I know you're not saying you lock your knees out, but yes, that will be more hamstring. But I just think you are asking for Snap City. And
the only reason that like I say, when I put that A in there to change the acronym, what I'm going with is I consider a stiff-legged deadlift locked. Like your legs are locked. The knees are kind of thrown back, for lack of a better way to put it. So what I do is I just slightly unlock them. And I don't know that I could actually put a number on the angle, but it's just
like
unlocked.
You're talking like 5 to 10 degrees, not 20 to 30.
Right, exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
So that 100. Yes, I don't want. Yeah, because when people do that, I'm like, you're kind of like mimicking a half squat, half deadlift, right? That's what we don't want. You want to be hinging through the hips. Your knees are pretty much stationary. They might change their angle by 3 to 5 degrees. It's minimal. Okay. So,
but I notice a big difference. That's why I say I'm not as much of a fan of the RDL as I am the almost stiff leg deadlift. So if I have to pick one, I am definitely passing on the RDL. This is personal, just based on what I have felt over the years. So I would pass on the RDL and I would smash the almost stiff leg deadlift. That's how I would approach it. That's probably why I'm not a huge fan of the RDL.
So let me show you one video and you tell me, is this similar to yours, since I can't see your video? Here is my trap bar. Is your knee around that same degree, or are you doing even less movement?
I have less of an angle at the knee for the almost stiff leg deadlift.
Okay. So even less than that. Okay.
Yeah.
So just to make sure we're on the same page, this is what you would consider Romanian versus your version, which is even a little bit straighter.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. All right, just making sure we're on the same page and listeners are too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I need to do is I'm going to get a video of me doing a version of my almost stiff leg deadlift, and we're going to inject it into the discussion here in the post-editing type phase.
Yep.
All right, cool. Let's segue in then into the leg curl, because this is where it gets a little sticky. I also posit, as I said earlier, that the seated leg curl is not as effective for me as the lying leg curl. I understand the concept of the seated leg curl providing more of a stretch, but here's my argument against that.
Mm-hmm.
The hammer strength seated leg curl doesn't provide much of a stretch because in that stretched position, there's less resistance based on their lever system for that particular exercise. Now, I understand that there are numerous other leg curl machines that will give you more of a stretch in the stretch position or more resistance in the stretch position. However, trained in a lot of gyms for many, many years, and it's not common to find a machine that is a seated leg curl that provides, in my opinion, a lot more resistance in that stretch position versus the contracted position. So that's my main argument. Am I kind of, you're following me?
Well,
I think.
yeah, like the machine's different. I mean, people who make a seated leg curl without a lap pad order their filet mignon well done with a side of ketchup. I'm like, how do you ruin something that shouldn't be ruinable?
Right.
So yeah, it's highly variable. I think a proper seated leg curl with a lap pad for starters that allows you to have resistance in the lengthened position is vastly superior to any leg curl. Because I also think most people do lying leg curls wrong, where they're using their low back and their glutes to initiate the movement, right? So that's, we'll talk about that in a second. But we do know head-to-head, prone versus seated. Now, people quote this study all the time. I do as well. But just know, remember we talked about studies on training, take with a grain of salt, because they're always broke college kids. Experience means they've probably trained for 6 months. They haven't done it for 20, 30, 40 years, right? They're not hardcore bodybuilders. And we are fighting over millimeters, maybe even fractions of millimeters of growth, right? So a 5%. So in the one study that compared it, the prone hamstrings, they grew 9% via volume. The seated saw a 14% increase in hamstring volume. So that's 5%. So then I go, what do you have access to, right? And what do you prefer? So I have one gym has great seated leg curl. The other gym has 5 leg curls. They're all trash. So I do lying dumbbells on the ground, right? It's just awesome. We do know the seated will hit the long head of the biceps femoris and the semi-tendinosis, right? So usually a leg curl's more semi-tendinosis, biceps femoris, right? The semi-membranosus is the deep muscle. That really, it's going to be active, but it's always the least amount unless you're doing like the Nordic curl, which will also hit the short head of the bicep femoris and that. So if you have a good seated leg curl, I love it. There's a bunch of ways you could do it. You could lean forward so long as your pelvis doesn't dump back to a bunch of posterior pelvic tilt to increase the stretch, which I think is even better to do that. Now, you could also allow your hips to kind of dump back. So posterior pelvic tilt, you'll be a little bit stronger, because we're about to talk about an important concept when it comes to leg curls is that of active insufficiency. So that's why a seated leg curl, both the hip is flexed and the knee is flexed. We do know it has the most amount of force in the fully shortened position because of that. So a lying leg curl, your hip is either slightly flexed or kind of extended. And that's why that is more of a lengthened position movement. No, I'm sorry. So that is a shortened position movement, but we lose control. So what active sufficiency is a muscle that crosses 2 joints. Both joints are shortening. So it's so short, the structures in the muscle are getting so short, they can't exert a lot of force. Okay. So that most times we don't need to worry about active insufficiency, but I bring it up. Like in the course I just put out, I bring it up because if you have a lagging body part, you should probably stay away from active insufficiency movements because you already have a hard time recruiting it. So if my hip is extended and my knee is bent, my hamstrings being shortened on both sides, when I have full knee flexion, there's not a lot of force being exerted because everything's so damn short. Tension is coming off of the muscle. So because my hip is flexed and my knee's fully flexed in a seated leg curl, there's still a lot of tension on the hamstrings. As I go to a lying leg curl, we're losing that, right? And that's why the standing leg curl is complete trash because one, you've taken gravity away, so you can't stabilize your low back. It feels hard, but nobody's going to build massive amounts. We know of all the studies, the standing leg curl has the least amount of growth or activation. But one really important thing is lying leg curls. And I'm sure you do this, but people will not squeeze their glutes to lock their hips in place. So their low back is dumping and starting the motion. That's why a lot of people will complain their low back gets lit up in lying leg curls. You have to squeeze your glutes to lock them into place, right? That's the key. And then as you go up, the cue I'm a big fan of is as you get in that fully shortened position, now visualize bringing your knees slightly off the pad and you'll get it even shorter, right? So those two cues are huge. Also, your calf does the first 15 degrees of knee flexion, your gastrocnemius in particular. So if you're somebody who struggles to feel your hamstrings in a leg curl, don't go to full extension, stop at 15 degrees short, and that'll stay in the active range of your hamstrings the whole way. That's why I think lying dumbbell leg curls are even better, because one, the dumbbell by nature doesn't allow you to go to full lockout. Plus, it's great rehab for a variety of reasons. And then you're not bringing the dumbbell all the way up, right? You're going to stop. I'm squeezing my glutes and I'm not going to 90 degrees of knee bend. Otherwise, there's no tension on it. Now, you could add a resistance band to go to full bend, but see how I'm stopping just short? You could do that to emphasize the movement, but you squeeze your glutes. My hips are locked in place. See how there's no motion, right? And then you're getting all that. So I think lying dumbbell leg curls, I love. Most of the prone machines I have access to are complete trash, so I don't like them. With my low back injury history, they typically flare my low back up anyway, so I'm not going to do that. I have access to a proper seated leg curl, but you've got to lock your hips in place, know the calf involvement, and know that, yes, certain movements are going to put your muscle in such a shortened position, you can't generate a lot of force. Now, if you have amazing hamstrings, who gives a shit, right? Like, keep doing it. But if they are lagging, then you need to stay away from those motions.
I kind of see the dumbbell leg curl as more of a movement that will help you get a better movement pattern, for lack of a better word, out of
1,000%.
Because I don't see it as
1,000%.
I don't see it as much as like you can't go real heavy on it. So I don't see that movement as a like a main exercise in a routine where you would want to like make your hamstrings huge. But it would be a good teacher to be able to engage, the glutes. And you make a great point about the glutes. We are taught in every other movement to keep the glutes tight. I always use the cue, have used it for years. I got it from a training partner of mine who was a chiro back in Colorado the last year before we left for Florida. And I'd be doing bent over rows and he'd come up and he'd just jam his finger in my glute. My glute. Okay. My glute. And I'm like, what are you, like, I get done with the set. I'm like, what are you doing? So he'd laugh. I'm making sure that your glutes are activated, that you're using your glutes to help stabilize your lower back. That's what you do with pretty much anything, whether it be the belt squat, the RDL. I mean, I'll end up getting a pretty good pump in my glutes after RDLs to the point where I'm like, I don't know, I might feel more of a pump in my glutes than I do in my hamstrings. But anyway, the point being, we wouldn't want to then move to a movement like a lying leg curl.
But everybody does.
Exactly.
Nobody squeezes. So when I do seminar, like I did a seminar here 2 weeks ago, and we did that, and people were blown away. I will say, though, during the lockdown, I could only do dumbbell leg curls, and I got up to rest pause sets with a 4-second negative of a 90-pound dumbbell.
Really?
And my hamstrings blew up.
Okay.
It's brutal. I love it because I could take my crazy 900-pound, 800-pound deadlifters and humble them in the office with a 35-pound dumbbell.
Sure.
And I'm like, that's a problem, right? It also, I hate the term bulletproofing. And yes, we're talking about bodybuilding, but I think from a preventative standpoint, it teaches everything to contract around the knee to stabilize it. So it's called a co-contraction. It's also brutal on your calves, training that method. So you're getting a good amount of calf stimulation, right? With that as well.
Flexion, correct?
Yep.
Extended. Yep. I mean, you can't not do it because you're not going to be able to hold the dumbbell.
Exactly. Yep. So it's not a chick exercise. You can progress it. Now, I could go to 100-pound dumbbells, but I lost the connection. 80 to 85 now is where I typically land. And every rep feels like my hamstring's about to rip off the bone. It's freaking awesome. but it's not the only movement I do. I rotate through it, but I completely agree. If you are having a hard time grasping the concept of locking the glutes in when you're doing your machine lying leg curl, do the dumbbells exclusively for 3 to 4 rotations. Then same exact concept on the lying leg curl machine, you'll feel the massive difference. You won't be able to lift it as much. That's why people don't like doing it.
Yeah.
But we're bodybuilders. You want to make a weight as heavy as possible on the target muscle. We're not, most people who are bodybuilders these days, I would classify them as power builders.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's not the point.
RS/ego builders, because
Correct.
God forbid we have to cut that weight at all and actually work on mechanics and get tighter on the
and then lifting that knee up, even though you may be moving half an inch at most at the end of the lying leg curl machine, or even thinking of bringing your heels up to your butt at the end of the seated leg curl machine. You'll have to lower the load by 20%, but I guarantee you've never felt your hamstrings work like that, or the pump you're going to get, or the soreness you're going to get. Now, soreness is not indicative, but I'm still a meathead. I like a little bit of soreness.
I think we all do. We know at the end of the day that it's not the main driver as to whether a workout was successful or not, but we do love that feeling because we know that's a different stimulus. Otherwise, that soreness wouldn't be there. Funny enough, I will recover and make my best progress when my muscles are far less sore than when they are ridiculously sore.
Yep. Completely agree.
There's an indicator right there that arguably that crippling soreness that lasts way too long is kind of digging a little bit of a hole as far as recovery. It does it hits your system pretty hard.
So we'll do a whole topic on this, but what's interesting is, chest is my lagging body part and it gets insanely sore. Like I have to do almost the least amount of volume for it because it gets way too sore. But legs don't get that sore and they grow like crazy on me for my genetics. So chill out, everybody. Right. But like I had to start pulling back, even though it's my lagging body part, you would think more. But I'm like, I think it's because I'm finally learned how to contract it, where different body parts are going to need different volume requirements. So pay attention to your body. If you're crippled and you're not making progress, you're trying to dig a ditch to where when you put dirt back in it, there's a little bit more dirt.
Right. Exactly. But
if you're getting out the bobcat, like you're never even getting it back to the surface. That's why when you take time off, you rest, you do a deload, you go on vacation, all of a sudden you're like, wait, my arms just grew. I'm like, your arms were never catching up.
Right. Yeah. And I would almost pose this question to the listeners. Think about the muscles that get the most sore consistently. And then ask yourself if those same muscles are your strong points or if they're your weak points.
Yep.
There might be a connection there. And when you see that connection, then you have to be logical and ask yourself, what am I not doing right then if 1 + 1 is equaling 2? Yeah. Very good point. Now, let me add this about the lying leg curl. One of the main reasons that I'm not a big fan of the seated leg curl is I have seen that when I switched to a seated leg curl predominantly for about 3-4 years, my hamstring development went down. Okay. That's the main thing. Now, correlative or causative? Obviously, there are a myriad of variables in there that could only make it causative, but the brain goes to causative. Well, it's because I haven't been doing them and I've been doing this exercise that my hamstrings are not as good as they were before. So the other thing too that I want to point out to you and ask you about is this: understanding the mechanics of the hip and a seated leg curl, providing more of a stretch in that stretch position, especially even leaning slightly forward, which is a great cue, like you said. I understand that makes complete sense. But then I compare that to the resistance being stronger there being more resistance in the stretch position of the leg curl. And that's where my brain goes, okay, more muscles will fire in the stretch position of a muscle. So arguably, when there's more resistance in that stretch position, there is arguably more potential for growth. I compare it to this, and maybe it's not a good comparison, so I'm asking you. Let's compare say like incline dumbbell curl. Okay, you can't use a big amount of weight on an incline dumbbell curl, but that is clearly because your elbows are back and the bicep is going to be stretched in that stretch position so much more than, say, I think you're familiar with a preacher curl that is straight out in front of you. It's typically a machine. It's kind of an old school machine where you have more resistance in the bottom in that stretch position, but the elbow is high. It's not behind the shoulder. So is it the same principle in that it can then be argued that even though you're not using as much weight in the incline dumbbell curl, that because there's more of a stretch, there's more potential for growth than there is on the machine where your elbows are higher? And if that answer is yes, then those are the things that I struggle with, because that falls back to the things I complain about the current state of our industry, comparing kind of like that. There's that side lateral where you're lying down on an incline and they're saying, oh, this is way more effective for hypertrophy and size because the EMG studies say that more muscle fibers fire in that position. But no one is getting huge doing that exercise. So there's this chaos in my brain trying to make sense of it. Can you help me with that at all?
Give me 1 second. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Lengthen position movements, we do know. So the whole lengthen mediated hypertrophy is all the rave of lengthen partials. Okay. We do know that lengthen position motion movements will add another hypertrophic stimulus because they will actually increase in length rather than diameter, right? I think I have that right.
Say it again.
So let me think about it. Okay. Yes, here we go. So a lengthen position motion, when you're putting the muscle under loaded stretch, it'll grow more in the length. So it'll create rows of new muscle versus the actual diameter. So that's what the stretch mediated hypertrophy is doing. Okay. So it's doing that. Now, most muscles grow better from a lengthened position, especially the lower body. However, to have a true lengthened position for a dumbbell, the incline dumbbell curl is not a true lengthened position because gravity is pulling the weight down. You would need the resistance to be pulling behind you. So how you would do that is using a cable, right? So you would do a standing cable curl with your elbow behind you, almost like a drag curl, but the cable is pulling behind you. That is a true lengthened position movement for the bicep. So that
why is that different than the incline?
Because
when we're lying back.
Correct. Because the dumbbell, though, the gravity is still pulling straight down. You would need it pulling behind the bicep in order to create that true lengthened position movement.
Okay, then let's put it let's speak of a different position then.
Yep.
Let's say we're lying down on a flat bench doing a curl. Gravity is pulling it. Excuse me, I'm having a really hard time with this.
There you go.
If you're lying down on a flat bench and you're doing a curl, even though clearly it's not a great idea mechanically, but would that not be the same? Even though it's obviously pulling against gravity, it would be the same thing as pulling. I'm using the flat bench as an example to make the angle more obvious, like extreme, showing that it's obviously pulling from behind. So let's say the incline wasn't just a slight incline. Maybe it's like a 45-degree incline. It's technically pulling to the back, much like a cable would if you were standing straight up and the cable were behind you, right? I mean, if we looked at those angles, they'd probably be very, very similar to a 45-degree incline dumbbell curl.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
But it's still the angle of the. So let me pull this up real quickly. Here would be a true lengthened position motion. The cable's pulling behind me, right? So see at the bottom right there, the cable's at an angle. If I have a dumbbell, no matter where I'm at, the line of pull is going straight down from my hand. So there is a cable that is angled behind me. That's how you get an actual lengthened position movement on the biceps. This is very specific to the biceps only, right? Most positions would be that. So that's why we're going down a rabbit hole. That wasn't the topic, but that's how you get the line of pull to be pulling behind the bicep. So it's getting lengthened, because otherwise you're putting it under stretch, but you're trying to get a loaded stretch. And that's how you would actually load those fibers.
Okay. And I agree that we're going in the wrong direction. I was trying to use the comparison because I think there are similarities as far as the angle And that's why I was trying to compare that to the seated leg curl versus the lying. That's the only thing, but you're right.
But then like for you though, but like people, like everybody's femur length's different. Your machines are different. Like some people connect stuff to better. So everything, like everybody's an N of one. So N is the research participants. Like everybody's got to find what works for them. So anecdotally, right, it is evidence-based for you to say the seated leg curl machine you had access to during those 4 years did not do it for you, which is why you say you like a prone leg curl. One gym has access to a great seated leg curl. The other gyms I go to, they have multiple leg curls. I typically do dumbbell leg curls there, right? So what you have access to, the equipment matters a ton, as does your body's individual lever lengths, i.e. bone length and all that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that is a pretty good takeaway, because even when you think about the lying leg curl, there are very strong angle. Then you have limiting sometimes where the lever arm won't go deep enough. I go to adjust it thinking, someone had shortened the range of motion, and it's as deep as it'll go. I'm like, I don't like that. Nothing worse to me than a machine that's limiting for range of motion, and I can't get the range of motion that I want out of that machine. So good points. I still will include the seated leg curl, but it's more for variety and a change of pace than it is going, I just really prefer this exercise. Now, I will not do the standing leg curl because I feel the same. There's a couple reasons I don't like it. Number one, I don't feel much of a load. Number two, I don't like exercises that you could continue to do 40 or 50 reps, but they're not going to be the range of motion that they were for the first 10 reps. And I don't work well in gray areas. So if I'm going to come up short an inch or so and I can keep going, that to me, I want to fail, not just I missed it by an inch and they just keep getting shorter and shorter. So not a big fan. And I'm also not a fan, admittedly, I say this a lot on BSG. I'm not a fan of doing one side, like the left side, and then for a full set and then training the right side. The only time I'm going to alternate ever is if I can go left, right, left, right, left, right at the same time. And I know that that's an OCD thing.
Yeah.
But the reason is because we all have a dominant side. We all have a side that's slightly stronger, whether it's just stronger on the one side or we have better neurological, almost coordination on the one side than the other. I'm lucky because I'm kind of ambidextrous. I can write my name quite well with my left hand. I can throw a baseball right-handed, left-handed. I can skateboard or snowboard, with my left foot forward or my right foot forward. Not a lot of people can do that. I will pick up a spoon or a fork, basically whichever hand's closer to me. So not everyone is like that. And I still don't want those imbalances. So I'm a little bit OCD about that.
There's so much to unpack
throw that
there.
one away.
Okay, so
my therapist says the same thing, Dr. Blair.
So I am a fan of unilateral training because we know you allow for more motor unit recruitment. So I like doing unilateral training at the end of a session because it allows you to get a bigger stimulus. And then I actually like that because you're working on imbalances. So you do your weaker side first, and then you simply match with your stronger side. And I also prefer to rest in between. So if I'm going to do a single leg, like one of my tutorials is a single leg, hams only seated leg curl. So I'm not going to full extension. I do my left leg, then I rest.
Yeah. That's
and then call. I do my right. I don't go back and forth because you are going to have, even though it's a different limb, your nervous system is going to have a little bit of central fatigue, and there's going to be peripheral fatigue, which is another topic for another day, right? I like unilateral towards the end of a workout or a lagging body part. Start with your weaker side first, simply match with your dominant side. The standing leg curl, you took a lying leg curl and you made it 10 times worse by taking away the one advantage of a lying leg curl, which is gravity's pulling you down. And think about, you have gravity pulling you down and people are still doing it fucking wrong. Because they're not squeezing their glutes. How you have no prayer in hell of doing a standing leg curl and doing it right if you don't know that. However, there's two things I teach. There's three things I teach with that. If you have to do a standing leg curl, this is just me. This is my OCD of what I do. I want you, actually, this is the one time I want your toes off the ground on the platform. If ones where your knees are in the harness, then it doesn't matter. But if you're standing on a platform, those toes are up, because what do we do as we start to hit failure? That heel comes up, right? So you're getting a position that's known to tear Achilles. So I've had a person tear their Achilles doing a standing leg curl. So we'll leave it at that, right? 2, you're squeezing your glutes for all you're worth. And 3, you could actually play with hand pressure to use a system called oblique slings. So you're using different parts of your body to lock yourself in. So if I'm doing my right leg is curling on the standing leg curl, I push into the handle with that side, and then I pull with the opposite, and that'll activate this X pattern of musculature that will help lock your pelvis into place. So if you have to do a standing leg curl, your toes are up, so you're not, because people, as they near failure, they'll start pushing off that back foot and slamming both their ankle, their knee, and their hip into something called triple extension, which is a mechanism for an Achilles tear. You
don't want that.
Correct. And that's a terrible story. Like when I tore my calf, at least I was doing calf raises.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But then, and then you're squeezing your glutes for all you're worth, and you are pushing with the same side arm as your leg that's moving, and you're pulling with the opposite. That's how I could at least say, hey, it's still better, but I completely agree. The range of motion gets less and less and less and less. Yeah. So for somebody who's, I'm big on my logbook, like, what am I going to say? 7 good reps, 3 were okay, 2 were terrible.
Right.
Like,
17 partials.
Yeah. Yes, correct.
What did those partials look like? Were they 3 inches? Were they 9?
Correct.
Now, before we wrap this up, I do want to touch on, because you brought this up, and I actually forgot about it till you brought it up. Nordic curls. Is that a smash or pass for you for hamstring development? I want to say it's a smash. Okay, really? And then I want to hear briefly why that is, because I look at that movement, and I'll be honest, as many gyms as I've trained in over the years, I rarely come across that piece, so I do not have a history with it. I've tried it a few times, and it does feel a little awkward, but I could see, I'm like, okay, this could be a really good movement. But if you don't think so, I want to hear why.
So if we're talking athleticism and preventing hamstring tears, especially after you've torn it, Nordic curls are the undefeated king.
Okay.
You're able to do Nordic curls, your hamstrings, the likelihood of re-tearing it goes way down. It is a very difficult movement that most people don't know how to do. Now, if you have the Nordic curl assisted machine, I've never tried one, so I have to be honest.
That's what I did.
So maybe those are amazing, but I've never seen one in a gym, right? You could use a band or a pull or anything like that, but I've never really done them. But when I've had people try to do them, it's really hard to progress, because either you hit the rep or you don't. And then are you doing negative? Like, it's really hard to progress and be logical with your progression. So, but if, say, somebody has a machine and they love it, go for it. It does load the bicep. I mean, yeah, the bicep femoris, the short head, a little bit differently. So that's a positive. But from a pure hypertrophy standpoint, I don't think a lot of people are going to get a huge bang for their buck, and then they're going to be cheating. How do you keep forms standardized? Like, that's just my opinion. So,
so it's not anything that stands out above. Like, there wouldn't be anything with that exercise that you say, oh yeah, it is superior to this leg curl and not as good as it.
No,
okay,
no.
All right.
And I personally don't have a ton of experience with it, but you better believe, for any athlete who's torn their hamstring, our goal is get you to Nordic curls ASAP.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Then let's do this. Let's do a little wrap up as far as the smash or pass. As far as the exercises we discussed today, then for the hamstrings, which ones do you smash? Which ones do you pass?
My ultimate smash is probably seated in RDLs. The prone, I'll say smash if you know how to do it right.
Okay.
The dumbbell is a super smash for me. I freaking love those. And the biggest pass is standing. I think standing is complete trash and a waste of time.
Okay, fair enough. I'll tell you, this is how I'm going to go with it. I'm still going to pass on RDLs, because I'm going to smash the almost stiff leg deadlift. I would go back to that and use that before I would do, or feel that I was benefiting hugely from the RDL. I'm still a fan, so I'm going to say smash for the lying leg curl, because I am seeing better development since I have put them back in. Again, it could just be correlative, but I'm not going to completely pass on the seated. What I'm going to pass on with the seated is I'm going to have a clear pass on the hammer strength seated. And I'm going to tell you, I get your...
I agree with that.
Okay. And I get your cue about leaning forward, but I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not leaning forward. That's going to make it complicated. If I could set that back up, higher. Let's say the back was set straight up at a 90, but it's not. It's set back at like a 70, 75-ish. It's in there. So it's almost like a high incline pad, a back pad, if you will. So I'm going to pass on that unless I can get not a hammer strength so that there's more resistance in the stretch position and or a back pad that is going to be higher. I am going to continue to pass on the standing leg curl. I don't know that I've done them 12 times in 41 years of training. Some would argue, well, you haven't done them enough to know. I did them enough to go, I don't like them. I'm going to smash with the dumbbell. I'm going to go back to the dumbbell leg curl as kind of an opener to kind of activate the hamstrings and glutes and make sure that my form is tight. Obviously, again, plantar flexion, making sure that I'm able to hold that dumbbell. And I'm going to open with them. And I'm going to do that for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I'll come back and I will give my opinions on that. And I think it's probably going to be pretty good. So at the end of the day, I think that was a pretty good discussion. Very lengthy, but very detailed and in-depth as well. So instead of doing a follow-up segment today, we got a lot of feedback from the last show, which is great, but it was all positive and great. And, everybody's patting us on the back. We're so good at this. We haven't done this very long. We're so
one
good
out
at
and
this.
we're the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think this is how it goes. Everybody's very supportive and we appreciate that, especially out of the gates. It's not going to take very, very many more episodes before people are going to start to give, okay, well, I think you kind of suck and I don't know what you think, you're big, and I'm just waiting for it. But in the meantime, let's do this. Let's grab our gym bags and let's dive in. I want to know what you have in yours because I have what I think is some kind of, well, it doesn't seem weird to me.
Yep.
Because there are just things that you accumulate that you go, I have to have these to take away from all these irritating things that happen in the gym. So I want to see what you have, and I'm going to show you what I have, and we'll kind of go from there.
Love it.
We'll let Chris edit that part out because we got to grab them anyway.
Yeah. I said I have a lot of stuff.
All right. You got to go first. It's show and tell. It's kind of like show and tell when you're, how old are you, Marv?
38.
38. Okay. Well, I'm coming up on 55 in a couple weeks, but it's still show and tell like we're in kindergarten. So you show me yours, I'll show you mine.
So I figure we'll do like correct. I figure we'll do a category and then we show everything we have.
Okay, fair enough. What are your categories?
So I got my stuff. So I'll lead with the chiropractic stuff that I have.
Okay.
So I have Factor Floss or Voodoo Floss. So flossing is amazing for joint mobility pain. These are some of the wedges I was talking about. So I will put them under my feet or I'll even sit on them to balance out shoulders on a movement. And then lacrosse balling, the arch of your foot for a minute is a game changer for mobility. It'll release the whole superficial backline of fascia. So your hamstring mobility will improve from that alone. So that's a cool thing to do before leg day, before RDLs in particular. You're going to prime the foot and prime the hamstrings with a little bit more mobility. So that's really my chiro-based stuff, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I don't have any chiro stuff. My stuff's going to be lame
soft
compared
tissue.
to yours.
Yep.
I'm already
okay. And I guess we could throw in one more. I have my medical grade BFR that we talked about. That'll come out. Shameless plug. I've got a couple of those. You're going to hear promo code Dr. Marvin says. These are my medical grade BFRs that come with me in the gym every time.
Cool. Well, geez, I don't have any balls. I don't have any.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Yeah. The more I think about it, they didn't come out right. Yeah, I don't have anything like that. I mean, I have the typical. Obviously, I've got my belt strap there, but I have my douchey.
Yep.
I got one there for my.
Yep.
Which is funny because if I'm doing high quality video, I have this giant, expensive tripod that when you're walking in with it, you just go, God, it's so. Like I know.
Does it have a light on it?
That guy now. This one doesn't.
The big fancy one. Does it have a light on it?
No, it's just that it's one of those big, it's that German long brand, and it's super heavy, which is nice because if you happen to bump into it, it's not going to go over because I have an expensive camera right on top of it. But no, I don't. Okay. I don't have any lighting. I have a very advanced camera that can actually deal with pretty much any lighting situations anyway. Cool thing is I train at a gym that is 24/7 and it's kind of small. It's a garage style gym. So there might only be 2 or 3 people in there. It's when I go to different other gyms and then I have to drag that thing in there and I know other people are just like,
I put my tripod up and then I immediately put it down.
Yeah, exactly. I try to hide it in the corner when I'm not using it.
Yeah. I'm like, all right. I literally will collapse it and open it up 4 times if I have to film 4 different exercises.
Yeah. Well, I try to get my wife to do it instead of for me. I hold the camera. She's like, I got to train too. I don't want to do that.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's see. What do I have? Oh, I have one thing over here on the side that I will not go without. This is not for soft tissue. It's not really directly related to training, but it is. Everybody should have one of these. Bam! A can of silicone spray. Why? You have one too? It's the same one. Yep. That's awesome. And why? Why, Marv? Tell them.
Because some gyms suck and don't upkeep their equipment.
Most of them. And it takes a quick spray. And they'll get mad if you go cheap and
don't do WD-40. No.
No, at
do
least
silicone.
Right. At least respect them enough to put the silicone on there. It's kind of hard for them to complain if they're not maintaining it anyway, but still, you don't want to ruin the equipment or make it actually worse in the long term. So silicone goes a long way. I cannot stand drag on anything. Especially if it's like a cable crossover.
And one is dragging and one's not.
Exactly. And why? Because everybody has to do their tricep press downs on a double pulley.
Because of the lighting. The lighting's so much better on that side.
Exactly. Okay. Well, geez, I thought that would be like this awesome. And you're right there with, all right, fair enough. Okay. I bet I have one that you don't have. I have the Harley Davidson eyeglass container.
Yeah. Nope. Don't got that.
It's not sunglasses.
What's in it?
It's empty right now, but look at the size. It might hold, like pre-workout.
Yeah.
Insulin.
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah, because I am a type 2 diabetic, at least when I arrive at the gym, and then I go to the bathroom very stealthily, because, I don't want to attract any attention, but I do have to get my insulin. And it keeps well right there, and it doesn't get messed up in my bag. I also go from the tanner to my thing, and I will never be that guy who shows up and goes, somebody don't smell right. It ain't me. If someone stinks, it's not me.
I don't have that. I apparently care less about the general public than you do.
Always have a backup. Always have a backup set of earbuds just in case, because training, and it'll be leg day. And I'll put them in, and for some reason, they didn't charge right, and it'll be like 10%. And I'll be like, you got to be kidding me. Here's another one. I think this is vitally important. My wife came across these.
Yeah.
They're dry soap wipes. Oh. So how many times you've been in the gym, especially if you train later at night?
Yeah.
They're out of paper towels.
That's true.
Because, those people at the front desk, they're pretty busy.
It's a tough job.
Stressful job. It is very, very stressful. So they're not going to reload the paper towels. And most of the time, the soap dispensers are out too. So I can grab one of these.
That's actually really smart.
Good to go. And they don't make a mess out of my bag either. Now, which is kind of funny because it's a white bag, and people always ask me,
you have way more faith in yourself than I do.
Like, how are you going to keep that clean? Yeah. Like, I'm not. It's only 3 weeks old. It'll look like crap in another 4 weeks.
Yep.
And you got
the joke is my 80-pound suitcase carries around the gym every day is why the strength level I am.
Now, how about these?
What you got?
I always have an extra pair of shoes for calves, because sometimes I'll want to train calves and I'll be in regular, like those, because you can't train calves in those things.
Yeah. Oh, no. I wear minimalist shoes, and then these are, I actually didn't do them for years, and now I'm doing these on all my quad squatting movements just because I got a busted ankle, and it's making a big difference.
Yep. I used the Romaleos for quite a long time. I only recently got away from the elevated heel since the knee injury. I could probably go back now because it's been a while, but it's one of those things where it's kind of a mental block. I'm like, you know what? I have been using these Vibram soles, because I use Merrell vapor gloves.
Yeah, that's what I use.
Love them. Okay, so a couple other things that I think are important too. And you may have this too, the handles. I always have an extra pair of handles. And here's why. I don't know if they're in here right now, but I have an extra set because I left them. I have a bad habit of forgetting them at the gym, and then they get picked up by somebody else, and then they're gone. I have to grab another set and put them back in my bag, so I don't have them in there. How about these?
Yep.
How many times I go to the gym and I can't find collars. Drives me nuts. So I spent $15-20. They're super easy to get on and off. They're mine. I use them and then go from there.
I got the old school. I have I use the colored one. So for handles, I've got quite a few. So this is my handle to turn dumbbells into kettlebells. So my somersault squats. Angles 90 grips are a luxury item, but they are awesome.
I've seen them.
Highly versatile.
Okay.
They're awesome. I've got my Rogue attachment for the landmine because I love one arm landmine rows.
Gotcha. I think if Elite FPS makes one, it's probably better. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah. And then I've got my knockoff. Yeah. Smart.
You know, I got to
So Dave, did you hear that? Yeah.
Right.
So, and then I got my knockoff mag grips because I love these on back day. And this is for me the proper width for a, traditional pull up. They have wider ones. I don't like the wider ones.
Now hold that up again.
Yep.
And so I can explain. When I have my handles that aren't in my bag right now, because I got to put another, I loop a handle over each side and put it right there in that crack.
Okay. Yeah.
And I do lat pulls that way because I can't use the mag grip handles anymore. For some reason, they bother. It's not mechanically, it doesn't fit like it used to. I don't know why. And it doesn't bother one side, it bothers both. And I don't know why that is.
Huh.
Yeah, it's kind of an odd thing because I used to love them. Used to use them all the time. I can't carry it in my bag, but I'm a big Rotate fan. Those green bars.
Oh, yeah. I know you're
but
talking
I
about.
can't carry, they're too big. So what I do is I just buy one at the gym for the gym that I normally train at the most. I probably bought 4 over the last 6 or 7 years since I've been in Florida. I got another one. I don't know if you use these. These are old school. You got to be an old head.
I've heard you talk about them. I've never done it.
They're disposable because they get a little ripe after a few weeks. But this is old school Roy Collender back in the 80s. And I remember as a teenager, I saw them, and all it is a car wash sponge cut in half. I mean, I can get like a bunch of different colors for like, I don't know, $5 and throw them away every few weeks. But people will ask me in the gym, they're like, oh, is that so you don't get calluses on your hand? And I'm like, yes, because I get a mani-pedi every 2 weeks like clockwork. But even though that's true, and it does keep your hands from getting as callous, that's not why I use them. I use them because nothing you have ever used in your life will give you a truer grip. Dumbbell presses, curls, tricep extensions with dumbbells. As soon as you grab that dumbbell, it does not move. The only thing I can't use it for is back because I use straps sometimes for back. And you can't load a strap and use, you probably could, but it would be far more laborious than I'd want to deal with. These are gold. They're super cheap. If you get a chance, check them out. You'll be like, oh my God, this is, especially for pressing. You know how sometimes when you press and it's heavy and it digs into your, like you're in your third or fourth rep and you're like, oh man, it's hitting a nerve in my hand. Doesn't happen.
Interesting.
Doesn't happen.
I'll have to try that. So let's see what else. I know you won't have this because this is a prototype that never made it to market. This is a split squat pad to put on a barbell so it rotates.
Okay.
Oh, it's money. Of course, you could use a regular barbell pad or buy a pool noodle, but because of the shape, it fits your foot a lot better. I don't know why they never made it, but I love it. I have a squat wedge. I won't pick it up, but I've got 2 of them, the heavy prime squat wedges. So just for the listeners, my first one was 20 degrees because that's what they recommend on the website. It's too steep. So I use that one in office, and then I personally train on a 15-degree large squat wedge for ankle mobility. And then to allow myself, because of my bad shoulders and elbow, my days of straight bar squatting are done. But I bought this top squat attachment from Dave Draper. It's money.
Nice.
Because I don't like SSB bars. They put too much pressure on my neck, and I can't use my lats as well. So this thing is the best $135 I've spent in a long time.
How do you get all that into your bag?
So I will carry stuff around. Yeah. So obviously I will go in and out based on what I'm doing that day.
Right.
I did forget this is a mulligan strap used in Cairo. I will use this to keep myself in place for seated leg curls.
Okay.
Or other machine, some lat pullovers don't have the seatbelt, which I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I mean, they better have the foot pad. But this is used for treatment in office, but I have another one in the office, and then this is the one I use in the gym.
Fair enough. I have the expected things. I mean, I have the the wrist wraps, just in case, because on occasion,
100%.
once a year, my wrist will be bothering me when I'm pressing. And as soon as I lock them down, my wrists are good for that workout. Obviously, knee sleeves. What's that? Oh, yeah, definitely.
From
I
my
leave those in the
DC
gym.
days.
Yes.
From my DC days. Yes. This when I was
hide those under
all
something
about
at
it.
the gym.
Yep.
Good call. Yeah, because I try to leave stuff at the gym if I can, so it's not in my bag, because sometimes I'm lugging my bag and then I've got the camera and I've got the tripod. Like, this is just a lot of stuff. Crap.
For the serratus activation we talked about, you can use a resistance band. These work better. If you don't have this, and a lot of gyms have these. I don't use them for booty gain nonsense. That's complete hogwash.
Right.
But you could also use a pillowcase. So you could pull the pillowcase all the way to your elbow crease and use that. Heaven forbid, right? Especially in a hotel gym. Big thing. Yoga blocks for shoulder savers for hammer presses. I think those are mandatory as your training age gets up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it also helps with strength. So even if you got bulletproof shoulders, Skip will say the same thing. They're not going to be bulletproof forever.
Right.
Right. But also think about how much strength you're going to save from starting from that crazy vulnerable position. Right. So that's a big thing. Straps are mandatory. If you refuse to use straps, I'm sorry, your back and hamstrings are nowhere near as strong as they could or should be. I have a million resistance bands of different lengths, of course.
And I'm cool with using the straps minimally. Yeah, you don't have to use them for every set. But
Your working sets.
Yeah, you still need them. I keep them hanging from my wrists, and I might only use them for 3 or 4 sets in a back workout.
You do wrist cuffs?
Is that...
you could... It's a wrist cuff to loop the cable.
Oh, I don't.
Those are awesome.
Don't.
They're like $10 on Amazon.
Okay.
I think, and then you want to squeeze something in your fist. So I'll either squeeze my lacrosse ball or my wrist wraps rolled up. So just know if you squeeze somewhere distally, like you squeeze your arms and you're doing some sort of arm movement, there's something called the principle of irradiation, which will allow you to be a little bit stronger because you're tightening everything along the limb. So you'll have a little bit better force output.
Okay.
But I think wrist cuffs are awesome. You could also use them for like kickbacks for glutes and stuff, right? So they're highly versatile. Trying to think, I have a massage gun because I use it to increase muscle activity. So 5 to 10 seconds on your pecs and then do your working chest press. You'll have a better mind to muscle connection.
Okay. Dang, you got a lot of stuff in there, man. I told you
I got way more, but here, so I don't have insulin. But before I do that, gym pin.
Good call.
Shameless plug. Dr. Marvin says DC is your promo code.
Nice.
So there's 2 different sizes. I ordered the smaller size for like the actual thing that goes in the machine. Order the larger one. I didn't know, so I ordered the smaller one to be safe, but it will kind of tilt it at an angle. So some machines, it'll drag the weight stack, which is annoying as hell. So just know that. You could use a screwdriver a la Dante Trudell. That's what I did for years until the Cadillac version came out. And then smelling salts instead of insulin, and then education only. This is what I do. This is the wrong inhaler, but I use over-the-counter inhalable norepinephrine in lieu of smelling salts at the end of my workout when it's like my last Widowmaker quad set of the day. Use it based on the label. If you decide to use it, you should have asthma if you're using it. So that's just what I do. And I've actually gravitated towards that over smelling salts now.
What about pretend asthma? Would that?
Yeah. So if somebody identifies as that, potentially.
Yeah, I like that. Self-diagnose, but identify is even better. Yes.
Yep.
If you identify as having
I really
asthma.
think that's it. I mean, I got a dog leash instead of a dip belt, but my days of dips are over. But that $4 is cheaper than a $4 dip belt. Do you really need to use that?
Right. Apparently, I'm going to have to up my gym bag game. I have been.
And then this is the last one.
Yeah.
Metronome app. So I'll let a metronome run during my work set. So as I hit failure, my negatives are still the same. My holds are still the same. It's the best/worst idea I've ever had.
Exactly. Yeah. There's pros, there's cons.
Yep. But yeah, so that's my gym bag. Obviously, I will swap in the handles that I need for that day. But yeah, my gym bag is pretty heavy. Most of that's in there. Of course, like I'm not going to bring in my top squat or my split squat pad. But the gym bag's known well in the gym. People will try and pick it up and see if they can do it as a feat of strength.
Sure.
Yep.
I get it. I've done my game. On that note, I think I'm going to take us out. Dr.
Cool.
Marv, a lot of information today. We covered a lot of exercises in the hamstring discussion, and I got beat up pretty bad on the gym bag situation, but it is what it is. I have to come back stronger next episode. If you guys enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe. I don't know, ring the bell, that sort of thing. Tell all your friends about it. Share it with all your friends. And we want to hear your feedback. If you have a topic that you want to hear us discuss or debate, we'd love to hear about it. If you have any further questions about the current topic, let us know in the comment section. If you think I suck and should not be a bodybuilder and talking about bodybuilding, I want to hear that. I want to hear that too. Things like that. It just makes my day. It just makes me feel special and loved. Check out truenutrition.com if you're looking for the best protein, Team Skip blend protein that not only do I have my clients use, but a lot of the top prep guys have their clients use it as well. You can use a Skip code to save a few bucks. You can reach out to Dr. Marv on Instagram at The Educated Meathead, or you can hit him up at educatedmeathead.com. And you can reach out to me at teamskip.com, which I do have a lot of new merch in the Team Skip store that the guy who has done my merchandise for a long time finally is drop shipping for me. Tons of unique colors, high quality stuff, Gildan hoodies, so they don't shrink after you wash them. Very, very high quality stuff. Love it. Check that out. But you can reach out to me at teamskip.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Intense Muscle. For another episode of Between Two Dumbbells, thanks for listening.
See you guys.